You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes to continue hustling. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Chiropractic Rocks, True Weight Solutions, The 100-Year Lifestyle, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Ultimate Entrepreneur Opportunity, BrainTap, Sherman College of Chiropractic, SCED, ChiroPro Accounting, and Midwest Brain Health Technology. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 249 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I am your co-host, Luke Millette, and here's your host, Jim Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Lona Cook. If you want to understand marketing to schools, stay tuned. All right, welcome to another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm here today with my co-host, Luke Millette, and we have on the other side of the screen here, Dr. Lona Cook. And Luke and I are coming in from
Grand Junction, Colorado.
And Dr. Lona, where are you coming in from today?
Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you on. You've always been somebody that I've seen from the peripherals doing great work, and somebody that I've really like. Whenever I catch wind of what you're doing, I'm always inspired. So thank you for doing what you do for the chiropractic profession.
Thank you.
And per our typical intro and startup for the Chiro Hustle podcast, we always like to get your story because I don't know it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't ask you it because I want it to be so fresh. Yeah. So if you could just tell us your chiropractic story and what got you into the chiropractic profession and kind of where you are today.
Sure. Well, I heard one of the podcasts I listened to that was a few back for you. Someone had actually a similar story, which I think happens probably a lot. I grew up in a household that utilized chiropractic. So my dad was going more frequently than the rest of us, but I had gone as a baby because I was colicky. And so I just thought everybody went to the chiropractor. I had no clue that the vast majority of people didn't know the benefits of chiropractic and didn't utilize it much like everything else. You know, you go to the dentist proactively. Why I thought everyone went to the chiropractor pretty proactively as well. So it was in my 11th grade year that I realized that I thought that's what I wanted to do. We had a woman chiropractor growing up, and she was very influential on me. I really liked her and her personality, and I thought it was pretty cool what she helped my family with her hands. So that was what inspired me to go down that track. And I worked in her office for a couple summers and then knew I was going to go to chiro school. The backstory that I found out later, besides knowing that I was adjusted when I was a few months old, was that my grandfather, who's now passed away, but he had been adjusted since he was a kid. So that would have been probably in the 30s. And he had this crazy story that he told me after I was already practicing, which if you knew my grandfather, he didn't mince words. And so I think he just never really cared to share this with me. But apparently he had been in a car accident when he was 15 and put his head through the windshield. He was in the back seat until he was knocked unconscious, and he had lived in a boarding home at that time. So he had no money. So the people didn't know where to take this unconscious kid that had no family there. So they said the chiropractor knows him, take him to the chiro's office. So they took him there when he was not in an aware state. He was like in a coma or something. And he stayed in that office for several days. The guy adjusted him. He woke up on the third day and walked out of the office. He didn't tell me that story until I was in like my second or third year of practice. And it like blew my mind. I was like, grandfather, that's the craziest story. I don't know why he didn't think to share that before. But anyways, that's interesting to me that my family's had many generations now that have been adjusted. And I just think like we're planting these seeds in people and we have no idea what it's going to mean for their future generations.
Absolutely love that. And I don't love it because your grandfather was injured. But I think like the epiphany moment of recovery under the care of a chiropractor is pretty amazing. And then your story of being a toddler, being colicky, because so many people think you have to be like injured or you have to have some type of a like, you know, some type of sports injury to get into chiropractic. And I always tell people chiropractic's from cradle to grave care. And it's for people that are not able to talk, from like little ones all the way to, you know, your last days. Chiropractic's healthy and safe and effective for all walks of life.
Yes.
And I think it's really cool to hear that story and to see how now you've become the doctor
Yes.
and you grew up in that lifestyle. So
Mhm.
I think Sigafus, our gold, said this, but why would you go to the bank and just steal the pins? And like, or the other one is like, why would you go get adjusted and leave the rest of your family home to be sick?
Yes.
And that's back to your father's story.
Mhm.
He would go and get adjusted, but what's going on with the rest of the people in the family? And I
Yeah.
think that that's the thing, is generational. We talked about this yesterday on our show, but generational wellness
Mhm.
is something that we have to, like you said, plant the seeds.
Mhm.
And we have to let people know that if you make deposits into your health today, then you're going to have a longer chance of being healthy long term.
Mm.
And I think that those are things that we have to like really anchor on and let people know it's okay to be healthy.
Heck yeah. Yeah. And I was just talking to one of my good friends before this, and he was talking about especially influencing the mothers who generally, I'm going to say generally, make health decisions for their family. If you're not making good health decisions for yourself, you are negatively impacting your generations to come,
So, what would you say makes you unique in the chiropractic world?
Currently, I'd say probably the most unique thing that we are excited about here is we are working in our school district. So we're bringing chiropractic into the public schools here in Western Wisconsin. We've been doing it for 5 years. We see this being something that hopefully takes fire and goes across and is a game changer for chiropractic and certainly the kids that it's serving and the families it's serving. The doors opened in 2016 for me to start to take some strides within our local district, and it grew. And now I have Dr. Amanda Haynes with me, and she's full-time in our school district serving kids all day long. And I think that seed was also planted for me. I was sitting in a room at New Beginnings, and Dr. Eddie Diaz had us all shut our eyes. And he said, I want you to envision a world where every child has a chiropractic adjustment before they start school. And, so I went through the visualization, and he said, like, open your eyes. Now, what did you think? Were you someone who could see it? Or are you someone who is like thinking about why that can't happen? And I was guilty. I was thinking that's not going to happen. And I couldn't see it happening. And so he, in the second sentence, he said, and shame on you, because you're the reason it won't happen. If you don't see it, the drug companies don't have trouble thinking about like our children's health and how big it is, right? Why can't we, when we're serving truth and we're serving innate healing, why can't we start to have visions this big? And that really rocked me. And I really do think that planted something in me that several years later, this opportunity opened up, and now I can see it.
Well, this reminds me of a Bob Marley quote. He said, the bad guys don't take a day off, so why should I? Mm. And I think that that's like the drug companies. They don't take a day off, so why should the chiropractors? And I think that generationally, if we plant those seeds with the kids, if we want to go full circle on this, that's how recycling programs started. They started recycling in schools, and then the kids brought that awareness home to the families. So if we started adjusting programs in schools, they'd bring that awareness home to the families, and those kids would be a healthier version, and the families would realize that those kids were, nurtured and vibrating on a different frequency, and they were thinking and staying active, and they were better temperamented, and they'd have a different, they'd be working on a different level. And I think that that's something that it's beautiful when we think about that. And I wish I would have been getting adjusted since I was a little one, but I didn't get my first adjustment until I was 16. And I can just imagine what my life would have been like had I started pre-K, getting care, what that would have done for my education status.
Yeah, I agree.
So going into a little bit different transition for the I know you mentioned Eddie Diaz giving you some type of a mantra. Do you have any motivational quotes that keep you going as a chiropractor or keep you fired up?
I don't even know if it's more as a human being. I think, first of all, my grandfather, the one I mentioned earlier, he used to always say to me as a kid, like, do something even if it's wrong. And it was kind of like, get off your ass. And I do feel like I had perpetually people around me that were like, just get up and go, like go. There's no time to sit here and feel sorry for yourself. There wasn't going to be any pity party. And so I learned to like get moving, and that served me really well. I realized that there's a lot of people who don't know how to make a decision. And I'm not going to say that all the time. I know how to like act fast, but it is interesting when I'm in circles where some of my really great girlfriends in chiropractic are movers and shakers. And I love being around them because they make decisions fast, and you can tell that their energy is in motion. And then sometimes you're around other people who don't, and you can feel the difference in how their lives basically operate then, because they're so indecisive. So him kind of instilling then that I can't make a wrong decision, I just need to keep moving, I think was really helpful. So that was a big one that I took from my grandfather.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people share wisdom, and it's up to you to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when people give us wisdom, we might not be mature enough to like actually receive it. And the greatest gift is sometimes just paying attention to what other people do. And you're right. The average person, if you give them a good idea, it takes them between 6 to 18 months for them to actually implement it.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are like early adopters to like new knowledge, like, yeah, stick around that tribe.
Right. Yeah. And I think sometimes, I don't know if you've ever felt this, but what I have is that, we can judge ourselves harshly, like on these things that they, are our strongest characteristics, but they're also where we receive criticism. And so I know there's been times where it's like, oh, maybe I move too fast for people and I need to slow it down because otherwise I like bulldoze people. And it just like lets you know who you're surrounding yourself with. Like there's a blessing and a curse in everything. There's a light and a darkness, so it's just learning how to, I think, have temperance with that.
So how do you think the world would change if everyone started getting checked and adjusted regularly?
Yeah. Well, the like deeper I've gone down the rabbit hole of trying to understand like health and human potential, the more I truly believe we're all just energy and we're all just frequency. And if the adjustment is tuning this energetic channel of your nervous system or this electromagnetic current that we are, the more we're in tune, the more the consciousness rises, the world changes, the illusions that we feel at lower consciousness go away. I really feel like the shift is so much bigger than we could know, because it is a frequency, vibratorial, energetic shift that is happening when we put our hands on someone and we can see their potential and we hold space for that. And the adjustment allows for a change to take place. Man, I don't even know how to dream what that would be like. I just know that it is possible because I think we're moving there.
Well, I like to like turn back the page a few and give a really solid analogy to this. And it's just like if we took Jimmy Page or, Jimi Hendrix and we untuned their guitar, what would the music sound like that they produced? And it wouldn't sound good. And that's really what we're actually acting as humans. We expect us to produce well, but we're not tuned well.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are angry or triggered or easily depressed or whatever, like the emotional frequency that they're riding on, if they were just tuned a little bit better, they would find more joy and connection and happiness and glee and things that are a higher vibrational frequency emotion. And I think, knowing kids, especially, like if they actually had people caring for them rather than telling them always what to do and how to do it, they would actually feel that level of connection to be balanced. And I think that as an athlete, I always performed better when I was adjusted. So I can only imagine what it would be for like the developmental years of like the brain and body connection to be tuned, like, a classic Gibson guitar that gets put into the hands of Jimmy Page.
Yes.
And what he did for Led Zeppelin. Like, just think about that, like future generation of doctors. Think about that future generation of when they're 5 years old says, I'm going to grow up to be a firefighter. I'm going to grow up to be a cop. Like, if those people are tuned properly, they're going to be a better version of what their dreams are.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That was a great analogy. I agree 100%.
Yeah, there's just so much to learn from these chiropractic conversations that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, I implore people to say, share this with your practice members, share this with your family. They're going to learn so much more about you and why you wake up the way that you do to go and do the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you've actually taken that model that you've created with your first practice, and you've helped develop that model into a few others. Would you mind sharing with our audience about that?
Yeah. When I started, I never had a dream to have multiple practices. But because of when I got married, we moved. I was crazy enough at the time to think, I started one practice and it's going well, I could do it again. And I quickly realized I couldn't do it by myself again. But I had a beautiful partner that joined me in practice. And so I could teach her what I had done the first time. And she grew the second practice greater than I could have if I was trying to do it and maintain. So it was like trial and error at first, like quickly realizing I needed help. I hired my first associate, got a partner, and we did it. And I was working crazy hours during that time. But I also realized, once you've done something, it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same second time, but there's a lot of knowledge to be gleaned, which is also why listening to things like podcasts and your mentors and whatnot, you can just shorten the time span it's going to take someone to get to what, had been happening before. She could do it faster because she had help. And so then my associate at the time then became my partner in the third practice. So we've gotten to go through the startup process numerous times. And the reason I feel called to do that is always about the people for me. Like, I've had amazing abundance in wonderful people around me that I want to continue to invest in. And if they want to open a practice and, that feels like the right move, then we've opened practices. So that's really how it worked for me, is like, if the right person appeared and I thought it was a good opportunity, why not duplicate what we've done already in the first practice?
That's nice. I like that.
So tell us, where do you think chiropractic is going to wind up in the next 20 years?
Yeah. I do feel like we are on the verge of something like big happening. I feel like the population is maybe more ready for chiropractic than the chiropractors are for the population, which is a little bit of a fear of mine. And maybe I can let that go. But I feel like they want it. They just don't know it's called chiropractic. And we're not ready to speak to that because we've been so used to kind of being like, I'm over here in the corner, I'm not sure if I should speak up. And that's where I think, the school district project has taught me that. It has taught me that if we can engage in this conversation and speak to their needs and not make it about us, man, people are open ears for new options and solutions, and working with them to find non-pharmaceutical options for their health and well-being and their potential. They want that language. They want to help themselves and they want to help kids. So I think we're on the cusp of it. And I hope things like your podcast and ways that we just circle up together instead of, finding reasons why we can't be connected, is how we really step up to serve all the magnitudes of people that are ready for this philosophically based, vitalistic focus, like the life force that's happening in you is ready to be unleashed and help people really learn where true health comes from. Man, I think we are ready for that. We just need more of us.
Yeah. Chiropractic's bigger than neck pain and back pain and headache specialists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that type of marketing happened during the Yellow Page ages. And it happened way before that as well. When a chiropractor would move to town and graduate, they would open up and they're like, well, what can I add to get insurance payback?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to actually play with the other team and show that I'm actually like a real doctor? And I think that a lot of the chiropractors in the yesteryear would try to distinguish themselves from each other so they could niche into a certain demographic in a certain part of the city to make sure that they were servicing that type of patient base. So actually chiropractors through marketing were taught to distinguish themselves from each other rather than to distinguish themselves like each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that now we have some retreading to do with the circle of time and say, just like one of my mentors, Dr. Ed Osborne, he would always say, we're all more alike than we are different. And I think that's more true than ever for the chiropractor, is the chiropractor is more alike than they are different. And even though that some take care of like pediatrics and some take care of auto accidents, the chiropractic adjustment's the one true thing that is like the golden thread that ties it all together. Is the adjustment is the adjustment is the adjustment. And that's the one thing that sets chiropractic unique and independently different from any other health source. And I've been saying this a lot, Dr. Lona, is chiropractic is a care of health system. It's not a healthcare system. You're actually caring for people's health. And I think that there's a misnomer in the whole like frequency of healthcare. Chiropractors are care of health specialists, and you guys care for people's health. And that's why people follow a different dimensional lifestyle when they start eating properly. They start exercising regularly. They start building out like a circadian rhythm. They start taking care of each other. They start finding spirituality. They start finding connection with their body.
Yes.
I think that's what chiropractic really is. So if we could just go back to the tenets of what chiropractic is, people would be like, wow, I'm so thankful that chiropractic has evolved to the point where everybody knows that it's not about neck pain, back pain, and headaches.
Yes, I agree. Totally. And I think it's semantics, right? Like some of these word choices have just been burned, like even wellness is a choice, a word that I don't love because like flu shots fall under wellness care. And so I think that's some of the things we have to just be mindful of with the public is like some of the words that maybe we've used, maybe they mean something else for other people that we're not intending.
Well, I mean, even when somebody takes their little baby to the pediatrician, a well check means you're getting shots. Like, there's no way to go around that. Like you can't mince the words like you said your grandfather wouldn't do, and I won't do that either. Like when you're going for a well check, you get shots.
Yes. And that's why I think people are starting to ask more questions than ever. In some ways, 2020 has been a huge blessing to the chiropractic profession in that it has sped up this curve of deeper level questions that we've been wanting the public to ask for a long time. And now's the time for us to find our voice. I really believe that.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Chiropractic Rocks, True Weight Solutions, The 100-Year Lifestyle, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Ultimate Entrepreneur Opportunity, BrainTap, Sherman College of Chiropractic, SCED, ChiroPro Accounting, and Midwest Brain Health Technology. Let's hustle.
Maybe you could touch upon who some of your heroes or inspirations have been on the journey of your life, chiropractic or not chiropractic.
There's so many who have helped me immensely. Probably the greatest influence I had in chiropractic business and pushing me off to the right direction was Tori Robeson. I think you guys have had him on here. It's really helped me figure out systems and know what to do financially and just started me off on the right foot. And I'm so indebted to him for all the help. I also if one of your questions is who would you want to sit in a room with? I think Dr. Hawkins that wrote Power versus Force. Are you guys familiar with that book?
I'm not.
No? Okay. You got to go down those rabbit holes because if you're into the vibration and the frequency of everything, man, his stuff is so amazing. He was a psychologist that looked at human states and figured out how to use AK testing to check and see where a different state would fall and how much power is in that state. And then you can literally test a yes and no response to almost anything based on where it would fall on this power scale. So he's so interesting to me because I would like to know, okay, where would people fall on the scale? Like pre-adjustment, post-adjustment. And he has all these series of books that come after it. His stuff just geeks me out. So I think I would choose either him or Dee Palmer to want to sit in the room with. I'm a Dee fan in the sense that I think this man had to just be like so before his time to be like channeling entities that give him information to, like there's just so many kind of wacky stories, but also it's like, wow, you have to be really open-minded to even like start to go the places that he went. So he would be really amazing to sit and listen to too.
Well, I think you're spot on with influence. We wouldn't be having this conversation today without the wild man from Port Perry, Ontario, Dee Palmer. And a lot of people don't know this, but the first chiropractor was from Canada. And Dee came to found Palmer College in Davenport, Iowa, and the rest is history as we know it today. And I really think that that's an essential part for people that are going to be watching this to know that, the greatest influence for the profession was one man with one vision, with one capability. And that was actually, he wanted to keep chiropractic secret. And, it wasn't until his son came along, BJ, that wanted to perpetuate the marketing and the scaling of the profession. And he's like, hey, Dad, we have to get this out to more people because it changes people's lives. And Dad's like, no, we can't let this out. So I think that there is a lot to be said about where we are, where we'll go in 20 years. Is chiropractic. But we have to start playing in unison with each other to where the groups of people that need the service, it's no longer our secret. And it's no longer the chiropractor that's over in the corner saying, I guess I could just help with that. Or I guess I could just help with that. I'm just a sports chiropractor. I'm just a pediatric chiropractor. But if we just realize that the first person that created the profession almost didn't want anybody to know about it, now we have to figure out how to do that the right way and get more people knowledge about what it really is and why it can save people.
Yes. Yeah. And it's really amazing to think like, in a very short period of time, how one person's idea has transformed so many people. I think we can feel like, what can one person do? And then he's like a great example of like, man, one person can change everything. So.
Amen.
So tell us a bit about how you market yourself. I know getting into the public school system is probably a massive step. What else are you doing that markets you? And then maybe what are some marketing that doesn't work for you?
Yeah. Well, we've gone through lots of ebbs and flows of how we think about marketing. And I'm back in a phase where I think about it a lot more. I have a new doctor, a new associate in the office. And so we're ready for more again in office. And so, especially with all the changes that have gone on, I'm trying to learn new things as far as how we can reach people online. So I'm just beginning that learning curve. So I'm not going to pretend to talk about it. But I will say that like just showing up authentically, whether that's in your lives or you're going to a chamber thing, or like Dr. Danny's doing virtual chamber stuff now, and being authentic has been the number one thing throughout the 11 years, I would say, is like, if my energy is not in something, then I probably should just not attend or go. And I'm not saying that I always want to do the things, but I got to get my energy aligned with it. So that could be from, if I'm going out to teach somewhere, like maybe I'm doing a lunch and learn, or maybe we have an in-office event. Again, you got to get your mojo behind whatever it is that you're going to do. I would say for the last 8 or 9 years, we've been more focused on like, how do we really support the people that are in the office so that they can be our tentacles out into the community. That doesn't mean I don't take marketing opportunities, but I've been lucky enough that most of it comes more organically through like, oh, we've got this patient who works over here and they asked us to come in and, talk to, their staff, or there's a couple businesses in town that have a lot of influence. And so luckily we've collaborated on events. We're going to do like a triathlon event with them coming up. And so we'll do social media marketing for that, but our names and stuff will get to show up on things. So I just really look at what is coming towards me and what am I feeling in alignment with? And then how do we leverage that? So whether that's, trying to put it out more on our social medias or letting our internal office, have it on whiteboards, make sure people know about it. I can do much better than I'm currently doing at it, but we've tried to keep those things going. So we're not always feeling like, oh, we forgot about marketing and now we got to start it back up again, just trying to always have that conversation in our weekly meeting. What's going on? What's on the calendar? Who's going to follow up with this? Because you are wearing so many hats and you don't usually get to do just one thing. You're going to do several things and keep those cylinders going.
So what would be some major advice that you could give to a struggling chiropractic student?
A chiropractic student?
Mm-hmm.
I think at that stage, knowing yourself is the first thing that I would, you can bang your head against the wall and look at all sorts of opportunities, but until you really get in alignment with who you are, it's going to be hard to make success out of anything if you're not congruent. And I think we're not taught that. Like traditional schooling, you sit down, you raise your hand, you get the right answer. You sit down, raise your hand, you get the right answer. You're not taught to go within and know who you are. And certainly as a chiropractor, I think hopefully our philosophy has already opened you up to some of that. But, that requires you to have a level of vulnerability first with yourself. And to know that like by knowing yourself, you're going to seek out the right thing for you. And it might not be what someone, your mom, your dad, your mentor tells you to do. But if it's more in alignment with who you really are, that's how you're going to be most successful. So I don't think you get to skip that part of like, yes, I know you got to be studying for tests and doing all these things and going to extra seminars. But if you forget to know yourself in that process, at some point, you're going to have to do that heavy lifting.
Do you think students should pick their schools based on geography and location?
That feels like a loaded question. No, but I also don't believe that you end up in wrong places. So I guess like a trick answer would be that I think wherever you end up is where you're meant to be.
Yeah, I think based on people's reality is where they should go. And a lot of times people want to nudge people to go to a certain place and get an education. But a lot of the times where somebody goes through that decision-making processes, I think a lot comes into their personal decision and a lot comes into, where does your family want you to go to school? And people kind of get into that trap of going to places based on a geographic location because it's close to home. Or, we can come and visit you. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we just have to make decisions based on what's best for the career choice. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some of the schools are taking chiropractic out of the schools. So the person referring to different schools have to be really wise on where they would refer chiropractic students to because they are the future.
I agree 100%. And with your question, I'd say like, should a vitalistic chiropractor be referring to certain schools only? Yes, I would think that demographic and location and all of that aside, there are several schools to send to, and that seems like about it.
Yeah, but if you're not sending them out to like a proper education with good fundamentals on philosophy and great knowledge of what that school is producing, then you're actually sending people to the wrong team. So we have to like make sure that we know what team we're rooting for. Yes. And education is one of those things that's going to perpetuate the future of the profession. And the people that are going to be adjusting in the next 40 years, those are the ones that we have to like guard the sacred trust with.
Yes.
And if we don't teach them what the sacred trust is, then they don't know what to guard.
And, I went to a school that is not philosophical, and yet I found it, and it was already in me. I didn't know it, so I do feel like people will end up where they're meant to end up. There's ways that we can, I think, help ourselves, certainly. But I don't know. I'm not that part. I think will correct itself at some point here. And again, it goes back to consumer of chiropractic. Like if the public is ready and driving what they want, hopefully that changes some of how the schools do their schooling. You know, if we see that this is, maybe it ends up changing radically and we can't see it yet. I don't know.
So how do you like to feed your brain? What kind of things do you like to read and listen to? And maybe what are some of your hobbies?
Yeah. Well, I have a 7-month-old. So, so my hobbies are like hanging out with a 7-month-old. I just went on a vacation for the first time in 12 months. That was like flying and it felt so good again. I'm a big traveler. This last 12 months has felt really weird. And that just felt so nourishing to like get in the sunshine and be on a beach again. So that is one way that is huge for me, is just to travel. And then I think you always get different thoughts because you're in a different routine. And I like to just let myself have some space to like dream and have different thoughts creep in. I also am reading right now. I already said I love Hawkins' work, but when I was on the plane, a book I had downloaded years ago reopened up for me just kind of randomly. So it was called Reality and Subjectivity. And it is so pertinent to what's happening in the world right now. And I started reading it and I was like, oh my God, it's so weird that this opened up, but it's one of his later books. It's awesome. I also love yoga. And so I'm reading some books on the yogic philosophy, which has many things that kind of overlap. And again, this like inner outer world connection of life happening through you. And certainly chiropractic is teaching us that. So anything that's quantum thinking, I like geeking out on. I feel like I have to like get it in while I'm like nursing and doing different things right now. But yeah, I also like, my brother is a human that he's into cryptocurrency, and he was in plasma physics before that. So if I ever want to feel stupid, I just try and talk to him because I don't usually understand what he's into. And so I had posed that same question, like, what do you do like to, get these great ideas? And he's like, I'm like, what are you reading? What are you listening to? He's like, I don't right now. I get quiet and I listen, and I just like reaffirmed to me again, this like idea of we tend to have so much stuff that we're taking in that we don't ever have time to like see what drops in for us as far as like ideas. And, in chiropractic, we say like innate thought, that I just really, that's sacred time for me, even if it's 10 minutes where I just journal or write or just meditate and try and see what's coming through and what way I'm supposed to like expand my life or could serve these principles in a deeper way and carry them out to humanity.
Well, I think a lot can be said about finding out who we are as a student. I think a lot can be said about finding the direction that we want to go as the person. But I also think we could say a lot about when we realize that if we have a concentration of effort, how much we can actually do at 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times we think that production comes from hours, and that's the conveyor belt technology world. But really, production comes in spurts. Mm-hmm. And production comes from great connections and great ideas. And connection comes from time blocking and making sure that you are primed. Like you said, if you're not in the flow for the marketing, it doesn't feel good. And it doesn't work well. And if you're energetically shifted away from it, it's not going to catch and it's not going to work. But I think what you said really matters, because you being a nursing mother, you know what 10 minutes to yourself is like. And you also know what it's like to be able to do an interview for an hour. So we want to thank you for being our guest today for this past hour, and being able to ask you all these awesome questions. And I want to commend you for actually allowing us to interview you with every question that we have, because so many times people go on this run where I'm crossing off questions because people have spent so much time on one or two questions. So thank you for being a very intentional interview and allowing us to ask all of our series of questions with you.
Thanks for having me. It was super fun. I appreciate you having me.
So where can people go if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah. my website's just my name. So drlonacook.com. So DRLONACOOK.com. I'm going to be releasing a book in May. It is meant for everyone, not just chiropractic profession. Makes me uncomfortable because I feel like I put way more of myself out there than I have in the past, but it is on this idea that we just talked about. Like, how do you connect back to your power? Like your reason for really being here, that I think isn't that common yet in the world because we haven't maybe learned to live that way. And so most of us get crash courses that wake us up. So I volunteer my own crash course that you can read.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being our guest today. Is there anything you wanted to mention that we didn't ask you?
No, thanks for what you're doing. And I'm stoked. And I love when I listen to some of the previous episodes, how you keep bringing it back to like vibration and the frequency. And I do think we can continue to have this conversation that health is an off or is a byproduct of like where you're aligned and not silo things so much. I feel like we put like, health over in one corner and then other parts of our life in these other silos and to really help people integrate like the whole person. Mm-hmm.
Well, if we don't talk about it, then no one else will. Mm-hmm. And that's the real power of Chiro Hustle is we keep free speech alive in the chiropractic profession. We're very much subluxation-based conversations, and we do believe in universal and innate intelligence. So if people are not on that frequency, then they should possibly dig into some of that old school philosophy and maybe refresh themselves. Because if we forget the past, then we're not going to have a very good future. So we have to always remind ourselves that the cultural conversation of chiropractic is ever evolving and ever changing, but it can't throw the past out and it can't throw the historical references out. It has to evolve forward with that involved. So that's why we do what we do, and we absolutely love it. And what episode is this, Luke?
249.
Well, 249 episodes of the Chiro Hustle podcast, and that's a wrap. Dr. Lona, thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.